In a futuristic Hong Kong, a lonely man falls in love, discovering that his life has been shaped by biotechnological experiments that suppressed his emotions. The film begins with Jack, a seasoned man who makes a living as a professional assassin, set in a futuristic and vibrant version of Hong Kong, bathed in neon lights. In this setting, where competition is fierce both professionally and personally, Jack stands out as a hired killer. He delves into the darkest, most forgotten corners of the metropolis, carrying out his missions with cold precision. Despite his profession, Jack leads a solitary life, often resorting to the company of android prostitutes to fill the void in his existence, showing visible emotional fatigue and wear from his routine in the bustling city. One seemingly ordinary day, while Jack was commuting through the city's metro, his eyes met those of a woman who immediately captured his attention. Driven by an unexpected impulse and his refined tracking skills, he discreetly followed her to a nightclub. Upon entering the venue, pretending to be just another customer, Jack observed that the woman was one of the club's attractions, performing for the audience who watched her from behind a glass chamber, a barrier that allowed them to see her but prevented her from seeing who was watching. Intrigued, Jack specifically requested to see this woman. During their encounter, she introduced herself as April and shared that she had left her small village in southern Vietnam to seek a new life in the big city, drawn by the promise of opportunities despite missing the tranquility of her homeland. When asked about his identity, Jack gave a false name, saying he worked in construction. After the session, Jack's curiosity led him to follow April on other occasions, observing her during solitary moments in the city and even discovering where she lived. However, as his fascination with April grew, Jack also faced health problems, experiencing chest pains and other alarming symptoms, resorting to medication whose purpose was not revealed. During one of these pursuits, while following April through narrow alleys, Jack noticed a man who seemed to be following him, a face vaguely familiar from a restaurant where Jack had carried out one of his missions. Determined to understand the connection he felt with April, Jack returned to the club where she worked. When she finished her performance and recognized him by his voice, he saw an opportunity to get closer. Surprised but visibly touched by the gesture, April confessed that she hadn't eaten yet that night. Courteously, Jack invited her to dinner, hoping to share more than just a meal. April accepted the dinner invitation, still somewhat wary. When her shift ended at midnight, she spotted a familiar figure in the distance. It was Jack, patiently waiting for her. As they approached, there was a visible initial discomfort, given that April knew Jack more by his voice than anything else. However, as they sat down for dinner, the tension seemed to dissolve. April, in a light-hearted gesture, took Jack's hands and commented on the brevity of the love line in his palm. Jack, opening up, confessed that his experience with love was more about sorrows and disappointments. During the conversation, he spoke about the gaps in his family history and the lack of deep connections. They exchanged likes and dislikes, and Jack found himself increasingly drawn to this enigmatic woman. At the end, he offered her some money, which April reluctantly accepted. After they parted ways, as Jack walked alone through the streets, he noticed his pursuer again. Determined to confront him, Jack followed, but the man was hit by a speeding bus. Upon inspecting the body, Jack discovered it wasn't human, but a humanoid robot. He found a memory chip among the wreckage, belonging to Masuka Corporation, a biotechnology company led by the enigmatic Dr. Bergman, who had been missing for nearly a year. The next day, with his health declining, Jack consulted a doctor. Tests showed his DNA was intact, with no signs of genetic problems, leaving the doctor with no treatment options. Determined, Jack decided to seek out Dr. Bergman personally, but upon finding him, the scientist displayed distrust. Dr. Bergman stated that he could not help Jack if there was no trust between them. Meanwhile, the relationship with April continued to develop. During a subsequent meeting, she appeared more natural, closer to her true self. She confided in Jack that after their first encounter at the club, she dreamed about him and missed him the next day, a new sensation for her, as she rarely felt a longing for anyone. After that revealing meeting with April, Jack's life takes an even more dramatic turn when he is approached by a man who seems to be tracking his steps. The stranger reveals that Jack had killed his brother, also a hitman, and that he now sought revenge. In that tense moment, as Jack held the gun with a steady hand, a wave of nausea overtook him, causing him to hesitate and lose control of his body. Suddenly, he vomited and collapsed, completely debilitated. Dr. Bergman, who had been silently following Jack throughout the day, quickly emerged to help him. Taking the now ailing assassin to his modest apartment, he checked Jack's vital signs, seeking to understand the cause of his sudden weakness. Jack shared that he began to feel unwell after meeting April, leading Bergman to suspect a possible connection between the two. After Jack left the apartment, Bergman delved into a deep investigation, revisiting his old research documents on life extension and infiltrating his former laboratory at Masuka Corporation. Meanwhile, he noticed a suspicious presence around his apartment and cautiously prepared to defend himself. Meanwhile, Jack and April continued to strengthen their bond, sharing secrets and stories from their pasts. April confessed to having lost a daughter, for whom she still prayed. Jack revealed details about his childhood marked by maternal abandonment and a distant father. Despite the danger Jack posed, April insisted he stay, but he, concerned for her safety, decided to leave, even though April reassured him that she was not afraid to be by his side. Elsewhere in the city, Dr. Bergman discovered an old and sinister dossier in his laboratory, documenting a series of experiments conducted on humans. The next day, Jack's personal search led him to his father's last known address, where he discovered that his father had died a year ago. The news deeply shook Jack, who had kept his emotions at a distance. In a twist, Dr. Bergman visited the club where April worked and tried to persuade her to distance herself from Jack, protecting her from unknown consequences. Confused, April took time to understand that Bergman was referring to Jack. Later, Bergman found Jack in a diner and revealed shocking details about his past. As a child, Jack was one of many street boys selected for an experimental life extension program, irrevocably altering the course of his existence. In the experiment, certain crucial hormones were blocked in the participants' bodies, depriving them of the ability to feel deep emotions. Jack was one of the subjects of these tests, which explained his efficiency as a cold and calculating assassin. Currently, the corporation was determined to recapture him, sending men and humanoids to finalize the research. However, a twist occurred. The suppressed hormones began to resurface in his body, awakening feelings previously unknown to Jack and causing an imbalance that made him visibly ill. Dr. Bergman, the mastermind behind these experiments, confessed his deep regret to Jack and warned him that his life was at risk if the hormonal production continued unchecked. Distant but unable to completely detach, Jack continued to watch April. Driven by emerging emotions, he gave in and spent an intense and revealing night with her. Although Jack was a man without apparent family ties, the film offers a glimpse into his past through fragmented memories. He recalls his mother and, in an attempt to reconnect with her, spends a night with an older robot, seeking comfort by simply sleeping with her hand on his head. He thinks about his father, whom he never met, and reflects on the sounds and images of his childhood, presented in black and white by the film. Jack questions the authenticity of these memories, wondering if they are real or just dreams, in a reality where even plastic strawberries are served in clubs. Jack's discovery of the artificial nature of his existence, coupled with his growing capacity to feel, redefines his perception of life. The morning after his encounter with April, he wakes up alone in her apartment. As he steps out onto the street, he spots two men, one of whom he had seen lurking around Bergman's building, and a black van ready to capture him. Staggering, he crosses the street trying to escape when he suddenly encounters the young man whose brother he had failed to kill before. The young man, seeking revenge, opens fire on the pursuers. A violent confrontation ensues, resulting in the deaths of the three men, while Jack, inexplicably unharmed, crawls into an alley where he may possibly pass out. The scene transitions to a skyscraper, where we see Jack back at his former job as a construction worker. It seems he has decided to return to a more ordinary life. After some time, he revisits the club where he met April, but upon inquiring about her, he learns that she has returned to Vietnam. Jack's gaze fixates on a plate of artificial strawberries, a symbol of the falsehood now permeating his existence. He leaves the place with a heavy spirit and disappears into the street crowd. Although Jack remains physically intact, his spirit wanders lost. The feelings that had begun to emerge were already complicating his existence, and now, without April's presence, his life becomes a deep void. The narrative follows with a series of quick slow-motion scenes, showing April's perspective on the morning after her last night with Jack. She had removed his gun and discarded it, a decision that left him vulnerable and could have cost him his life. April is also seen meeting with her young daughter, adding a layer of mystery. It is unclear what is reality and what is an illusion in their lives. In the end, the film leaves the audience immersed in doubts and questions. Jack, for his part, promises to continue waiting for April, facing the prospect of a life prolonged by scientific experiments, now more endless and uncertain than ever.